I'm Wesley Morris, and this is Cannonball. It's Wednesday afternoon, and you probably heard that Sean Puff Daddy Diddy Love Combs, he's always going to be Puffy to me. He was found not guilty on the most serious charges in the racketeering and sex trafficking case that the government put on against him. He's only been found guilty on 2 counts of the least serious charge, transportation for prostitution. And throughout the trial, I really struggled with whether to pay attention to this case. But I also knew that, like a lot of people, I had to for a number of reasons. For one thing, this is yet another very famous black man on trial. And I mean, he's a cultural icon. And for some people, you know, he's a hero. But it also involves some classic intersections of the American criminal justice system: grindhouse, race, sex, and the government. The government is trying this rich and famous black man on behalf of 2 women witnesses, one of whom filed a lawsuit against him. And for a while, I was content to follow from the sidelines like everybody else. For a month, I was really good reading all the great reporting that my colleagues at the New York Times were doing. Ben Cesario and Julia Jacobs and Joe Coscarelli, I mean, they were really doing it, getting up at the crack of dawn every day to go down to that courthouse. And then there were these wonderful courtroom sketches from Elizabeth Williams, and she did them every day. And they were your only window really into what was going on in the courtroom visually, because there were no cameras. And for a while, that was enough for me. But then as the weeks went on and I started keeping spreadsheets to keep track of what was happening and taking notes without actually going, I realized that I was kind of going through something myself. This is a really strange moment to be black in this country right now. And I wanted to see where this trial of this very famous black man sat in that. I just felt like I had to go. I mean, for one thing, I live in New York City. This courthouse is extremely easy to get to. And so I started getting up at 5 o'clock a few mornings in the last month of the trial to just go stand in line at 500 Pearl Street to get a seat in the courthouse, along with a bunch of other people. I mean, regular people from like the Bronx and Brooklyn. And in all, it was a really moving, strange, very 2025 experience that also felt anciently American at the same time. And one of my producers, John White, who I've been talking to about this case for weeks, asked me to just get my mic out and talk it through. So I'm sitting here at my dining table, and John looks like he's at work. Hi, John.
Hey, Wesley.
Where do you want me to start?
Let's just jump right in. You were one of the few people at the trial. You got to see it up close. Can you paint a picture of just a little scene setting of what the courtroom looked like and what you were seeing?
500 Pearl Street, you know, it looks like a lot of your brutalist government structures. You stand outside on Pearl Street, you wait in line. I got there, the days I went, I got there sometime between 5:30 and 5:45 a.m. And you're just always aware that there are people coming to just like see what I was seeing with their own 2 eyes. Some of those people were real big puffy people. Like, they were there to support him. They think that this case is some BS and the government is out to get him. And they were in a lot of cases, you know, they didn't have press badges, but they were TikToking, YouTubing, live streaming, courtroom watchers. His family his mother was there almost every day. Several of his children were there a lot of the time. I went on the day the defense closed its case. It made its closing argument. And 3 of his daughters were there, and they were like immaculately dressed, along with one of his sons. But I really noticed the 2 twins, and the girls were just really, I mean, they looked like they were going to church. is how I would describe. I mean, it was Sunday best attire. I actually, the first day I went, I got dressed up. And then I stopped dressing up quite as much.
Why did you dress up?
Because it felt important to me. It felt important. I mean, I'd been to court many times, but there was something about going to see this. Because really, John, I was going to make my mind up about not whether or not this man did anything criminal, but what to do with the idea that I was at yet another trial for a famous Black person.
Yeah. So, as you're setting the scene, I'm just curious, what did Sean Combs look like during these proceedings?
Okay, I'm going to tell you that part of the reason I was inclined to go and see it with my own two eyes was that in Elizabeth Williams' courtroom sketches, Sean Combs looked not like the Sean Combs that I grew up with and you grew up with, John. You know,
describe that a little bit.
He was gray. His hair was basically white. And his goatee was white. And I was like, this can't be right. I mean, for as much as I believed the truth of them, I just found his appearance in these courtroom sketches, I just couldn't believe it, because his hair was jet black a year ago. I don't think it was an accident. I think, look, I don't know how much he had been coloring his hair before this happened, but I think whether or not the defense's strategy was to get him to look a certain way for the jury, because the jury is 12 people. I don't know what the average age was, but I think the youngest juror was 30 and the oldest juror was maybe 70s, 80s. There are a few jurors, there are several jurors in their 60s. I mean, I think they wanted to make Sean look the age of the people who were trying him, to make him seem even more like one of their peers. Wow. He wore sweaters and slacks. I mean, this is the man behind Sean John. You know what Sean John wasn't making? Slacks. I mean, he wasn't doing sweaters and not like this. I mean, he looked like a deacon. He looked like a deacon on Saturday evening preparing for Sunday service. And this goatee and this white hair, I mean, I don't know how admissible this is. The trial is over, so I guess we can just speak freely here. But all I could think about was Uncle Ben. All I could think about was the history of desexualized Black men. And before I finish this thought, I'm going to interrupt myself just to say, this is a sex trial. The case has to be made over and over and over and over again for 2 months about all the sex that was being had, all the drugs that were done to facilitate the sex that went on for hours, in some cases, according to this testimony, days. The class of sex we are talking about, he gave a name. They called it a freak off. And, you know, in the popular imagination, I think anybody who is familiar with Bad Boy records, the people around Bad Boy, hip hop itself, I don't think that, and you know, the sort of the mythos of Sean Combs, I don't think anybody was necessarily surprised by any of those things. I mean, you and I have heard stories. We have been reading about his white parties, some of his extracurricular, non-artistic shenanigans and events for years. And so in the courtroom, seeing this deacon on Saturday afternoon preparing for Sunday service, it was like, wait, what? this guy, and the thing that I'm thinking about as I'm thinking about whether or not this was part of the defense's strategy here is like, was his hair being colored, or was he strenuously advised to not keep coloring his hair because the goatee matched his haircut? But it also is the fact that throughout the history of Black men in America, the least threatening style of Black man is the Uncle Ben, is Rastus, the guy on the cream of wheat box. It's Bill Bojangles Robinson dancing with little Shirley Temple. Like these non-threatening, and and a lot of times in Hollywood history, people who are in their 30s and their 20s and their early 40s are being made up to look like old Black men because that's preferred. So there just is something very wink wink about his appearance in the courtroom. It was like he was kind of playing a role. I mean, he seemed like himself in terms of his charisma was still a little bit on display, but there was something about the gray that really seemed meant to me to communicate to the jurors that somebody else did this. Does this guy look like a sex trafficker? Okay, I mean, maybe he sent all these texts. Maybe he was having all this sex, but racketeering? Uncle Sean over here? I don't think so. And I just think, the part of the 400 years of American history, or at least 200 and something years of commercialized depictions of Black people, whoever that guy was in the courtroom for those 2 months, he corresponded very tidily with that image of a desexualized, harmless, docile, subservient Black man.
So you're watching Uncle Ben on trial, and but you're having mixed feelings about I don't know. How are you feeling about what that means and how this jury might be interpreting this vision?
I first of all want to just say, like, I think the jury kind of did what it had to do. The government had a tough case to make, right? Because they wanted to really tie the documented behavior, courtesy of, a lot of video, that infamous hotel surveillance video or security footage of him beating Cassandra Ventura in the hallway in Los Angeles at, I believe, the Intercontinental Hotel. And the defense repeatedly said, like, yeah, this guy was terrible. He sucked. He's got some freaky deaky stuff going on. But all of that can be true, and yet none of it is racketeering. So the jury, I think it was really, to the letter of the law. I don't know. It felt to me like I was there for the defense's closing argument. And let me tell you, you would have thought that people had paid to go see a Dave Chappelle special, because this guy was like, Mark Agnifilo was the lawyer who did the closing defense argument. And he was just dismissing the government's case left and right. And, he went right up to the line of, this is the government trying to try a Black man who's very successful, and what do they want? They wanted some lube, and they found it. So we're all here because of some sex paraphernalia. Okay, that's their case. He's got to go to prison because he likes to have a good time. Well, you know who else like to have a good time? These women. These women were also up for a good time too. So I don't know what we're doing here. That was the defense's argument.
Yeah,
And people loved it. Like afterwards, we'd go to the cafeteria when we took a break. I think it was a lunch break and he hadn't finished yet. But everybody, I mean, when he finished, John, and I had heard that this almost never happens. It didn't happen in the courtroom, but people were clapping in the overflow. Wow. There was applause. And there was a woman behind me, a Black woman who, she's some kind of legal journalist. She's like, not us clapping for the defense closing argument. No, she got up and left. But it was clear, you just could hear people saying like, man, that was way better than what the prosecution had to offer, because I don't know if the jury found him entertaining, but he was very clear about what the stakes were and what they weren't. So I understand how the jury reached this verdict, given the difficulty of what the government had to do. It didn't really surprise me once I sat with it, but I was really convinced by the prosecution's rebuttal to the defense's closing argument. But the jury didn't buy it.
Tell me more about what you were thinking, because you didn't necessarily you thought that maybe this was going to go the other way.
I don't think they believed Jane, for one thing. I think that Jane was really problematic I think both Cassandra Ventura and Jane were problematic because it seemed like the defense could always just find text messages where they were just like, yep, sounds great to me. I can't wait to freak off. I'm here to freak. When, I was reading between the lines on every piece of their testimony, right? Like every time some text messages were introduced, I was like, yeah, but have you ever been in abusive relationships before? I mean, this is an abusive relationship. You keep thinking that if you do what he's asking you to do, then you're going to get what you want because you gave him what he wanted. So I'm sitting here listening to Jane. I would say day 20 of the trial. I don't remember which day of Jane's 6 days on the witness stand this was. But there were a lot of moments where the defense wanted to paint Jane as a gold digger, right? There's this amazing moment where one of his defense attorneys was asking her about Jane having seen Sean Combs with another woman in an Instagram post. And she had a Bottega Veneta bag that I guess Jane had coveted. And the defense attorney in cross-examining Jane was like, so you saw this woman have this Bottega bag and you felt some type of way about that, didn't you? And she was like, I did. And the defense attorney was like, I mean, all the texts are there. She's basically got all the information she needs, but she wants to dramatize and make it clear and try to catch Jane, I don't know, contradicting herself or just like shaming her into realizing that what you were really after here is this man's money and the things he gave you. And that's what you liked about this relationship. You were having all this sex because he was paying your rent, which in this case, he was paying her $10,000 a month rent on this apartment. But the bag. So at some point, the defense attorney says, how much does this Bottega Veneta bag cost? And Jane, who has kind of had it at this point, I mean, I think this was her last day of testimony. And Jane's like, well, you look like you would know. And there was some laughter. There was a lot of like, oh my God, no, she didn't. And the defense attorney repeats the question. I'm asking you, Jane, how much does a bag like this go for? And she says, how much does my body cost? I had to look at my notebook. She says, how much does my body cost? There was another moment about a Chanel bag. And the defense attorney is like, you didn't get the Chanel bag, did you? And Jane, without missing a beat, says, no, I got trauma. And I just felt like I was so much more inclined to believe that whatever was going on in those text messages was, quote, consensual, unquote, right? It's just there's so many salacious, like lurid, unsavory details. But at the end of the day, like I just believed that they didn't want to be having a lot of the sex they had. And the government was like, yo, they only have to not have wanted to do it one time. Once. That is sex trafficking. I mean, there are numerous examples of text messages in which the women are saying, I don't like this. I'm not enjoying this. There are a lot of texts in which they say they are happy to do it and they can't wait to do it. And, you know, Jane, of course, is helping set up some of these freak offs, or in Jane's case, they were called hotel nights. So, I mean, everything is muddled. And so if one thing is muddled, then everything is muddled at some point, right? Because you have your doubts. And the thing that I was having my doubts about, and this is not something I feel great about, but listen, welcome to America. You put a black man on trial and have 4 white women or you know, a table full of white women trying to put him away. You kind of have to watch how you put things. Or you don't have to, but certain people are going to hear certain things. And I was very receptive to their case, but I was also kind of like, you are all but playing on a particular kind, and the defense was prepared for this. You were all but kind of playing on a black male predatory stereotype that, I mean, it fits the scenario here. But John, I gotta tell you, like being there and hearing the way that the prosecution was putting some of his behavior, I'm not gonna lie, I looked at that table. I looked at him sitting at that table. And I was like, not Puffy, not Uncle Puffy over here. And I just think that there are all of these hoary old American tropes that when you're talking about a black man being on trial for anything related to sex, they're going to dredge up some stuff. And I definitely felt like on a number of occasions that these prosecutors are going they are going up to the line. And the defense, I think, in having him look the way he did, or making sure, like maybe stopping him from looking a different way in the courtroom, like the Puffy we all know and love, or maybe know and have complicated feelings about. That guy wasn't there, but this historical figure was.
You came into this conversation, I think, with mixed feelings about Sean Combs and his guilt, and I'm curious, now that the verdict has been decreed or read, are you still feeling that way, or do you feel like he's guilty of something? And what exactly is that?
Guilty of something. That...
Because you were feeling that way before, man. I just want to say.
Well,
it sounded a lot like that to me. Or what's on trial here?
Well, that's the better question, right? Like, that's the real question. What is on trial here? And whenever it's us in a government trial, it always feels like we're Black Americans, African Americans. Whenever we're on trial, whenever it's one of us, we kind of have to reconcile, especially when that person is someone who has given us, through their art, so much happiness, joy, has felt like a weather vane for either the Black condition writ large, or hope for Black people, or, it's just ingenious, like really created for himself or herself, but often it's pretty much, we're talking about men here. A lane that didn't previously exist, either because this country wouldn't allow them into it or because nobody else had thought to do what some of these people had done. Puffy was a steward of the black image, of a particular black image, right?
Can you describe that a little bit more? Like, what was this image, and what, like, I'm thinking like he's kind of a source of pride and black excellence, or just excellence in general. He was a mogul, a music mogul, and close to being a billionaire, which is celebrated.
I mean, that is a mountaintop for African Americans. And I mean, amassing wealth, and amassing a wealth that can be passed from one generation to another generation. But, Sean Combs, the hits are the hits, right? Like the songs that he produced, the productions he was involved in, Biggie, Mace, Mary J. Blige, just, we can leave it at that. Obviously there's more. I mean, Puffy was a superstar producer who also went in and out of being a performer himself. And he wasn't the greatest rapper, but his reach was huge, right? The hits were massive. And I think his talent scouting was, maybe, he was a talent scout par excellence. He knew who to get behind. He knew who could do what, and how to take that to the peaks of, American popular culture. I mean, he kind of came along at the right time. His melding of pop and hip hop through the samples, right? Like, was this song super popular? Yeah, I'm gonna take, Diana Ross's "I'm Coming Out" and throw it right in the middle of this record and have a massive, Biggie song on my hands.
It feels like you haven't been wrestling with this idea of art versus the artist stuff in this case, like you would say in the case of Michael Jackson, or wrestle, with Prince, Picasso. Not to say that he's compared to all these people, but, he is an artist. So I'm just curious, like, why you haven't been wrestling with this. It sounds like you haven't been wrestling with this idea in the same way.
No, my wrestling is more about what to do with trials like these. Whether the verdict is, whether they're acquitted or convicted. It's just, there's something that is always being asked of Black people in moments like this. And it's to situate this person who's on trial in a very particular history. And for a long time, that history really was about bogusness and a system that didn't have any regard for Black people or Black life, that was designed to disappear them. I think what I'm saying here, John, is, and I don't know where you are on this, but I feel like I have reached my limit. And I think what I mean with that is, like, on the one hand, I don't want to know anything about this man's sex life. I don't want to know anything. But now, I think thanks to this trial, I know everything, and more and more. Am I mad at the government with respect to that for, like, throwing his business out on the street? No, I don't think so. Although that's kind of complicated by this history that I'm talking to you about. I feel connected to this person, Sean Combs, for any number of reasons. His work, but also his personhood, right? we have been, as Black people, conditioned, encouraged, conditioned to be very skeptical of when the government comes knocking on our door for anything. Especially, I mean, really anybody, but it hurts. It's supposed to hurt more when it's somebody who has brought us so much pleasure and joy and fun and has made it out of what is waiting for and what many of us are still sitting in with respect to the worst of American life, right?
Cultural predecessors to that too, right?
You mean like OJ and Michael Jackson and R. Kelly, Bill Cosby? Sure. To lay out each one of those cases, they're all different, but they all ask of us the same thing, which is how much of what these people are being charged with having done do we turn a blind eye to? How much of our history as Black people requires us, when Janice Combs issues a statement that essentially calls this trial a public lynching, which is a real echo of the way we have been conditioned to think about these events. I mean, this is how Clarence Thomas described his hearing with Anita Hill's accusations against him of sexual harassment in 1991. He called it a high-tech lynching. So we are familiar with how to talk about being a Black person on trial because it never really feels like it's just one person. It's all of us. But at the same time, in a lot of these cases, the person on trial is depending on us, meaning his people, to understand that this is some kind of high-tech lynching. And I don't feel that way here.
And you're saying here you've drawn the line, despite the fact that he represents Black excellence, that Sean Combs represents Black excellence. You're saying no.
I just think that there's such a thing as Black excellence exploitation, right? Like, are we never guilty of anything?
Well, the question is, how did he exploit it? Then, if that's your argument, then how did Sean Combs exploit it?
It never felt to me like this was a case of a Black person's being Black on trial. The defense never. Only it walked right up to the line of thinking about this as the government trying to lock up a successful Black man. It really wasn't a big factor in this trial. There was no Johnny Cochran here to play the so-called race card. But there doesn't need to be anymore because we're now familiar with the mechanics of these events. Obviously, if someone like Sean Combs is on trial, something fishy is going on because it just doesn't make any sense otherwise. And, you know, there were many people doing TikToks and live streams and like leaving the courtroom to like update their followers to basically make that argument. I mean, there were people like, I got there 5:30 in the morning and there were people already going just like, yo, this is what's happening today. This is what happened yesterday. And they're just laying out all the ways that the government is failing to make this man guilty to a jury of his peers. And they were right. But I went and saw a couple years ago, last year, actually, it was a year ago. Gerard Carmichael, I went and saw him do some stand-up. He was trying some stuff out. He was thinking through his sexuality. He had come out as gay, not, you know, the year or 2 years before that in this stand-up special for HBO. And just out of nowhere, he was thinking about the revelation of some of these freak-offs, and that there might have been video of some of them. And then there were all these rumors about, who Puffy was having sex with. And Gerard Carmichael says at some point, I think he just tossed it off. This is a lot of work for people to be put through just so this N-word can not admit he's bisexual. And I think about that all the time. It came up during the trial. There was a moment when Jane was on the stand, and it was a really profound moment to me. And it was after a lunch break. She's on the stand, and she is thinking through what it was that she was really being asked to do by Puffy. Because his sexuality officially wasn't on trial, but we're just learning about its complexity, basically, and its shame. And in trying to, Jane to me was somebody who was trying to push him past his limits. And she loves this man. And she thinks that there is a possibility that they're going to have this great life together. And at some point she says that she was trying to understand the relationship, and she discovered the word cuckold, C-U-C-K-O-L-D, or, the short version is cuck. And she felt that definition was spot on. This is how she testifies during cross-examination, because it clarified things for her. This is me reading from my notes, basically. And she's trying to understand what he couldn't say. She deduces that cucking was a way to explore his bisexuality. This is what she says. And I'm paraphrasing, which he might otherwise be ashamed of. She surmises that, she's being used as a proxy for his desire for the men that she's being asked to have sex with. And at some point, the word voyeurism and escapism are words that he liked to use for these hotel nights that they would have. And she said she's quite thoughtful in this moment. She's like, no, those words never felt right to me, voyeurism and escapism. She liked cuck. Why am I telling you this Gerard Carmichael story, John? Why am I invoking Jane's belief that she was a instrument in the exploration of bisexual fantasies? It's kind of an excuse. And I don't mean like it's a frivolous excuse. I mean, it is meaningful. This whole situation is set in motion by this fantasy, by these desires, by the power to execute these fantasies on this massive scale. But at the end of the day, this, to me, represents the problem that I've been having with these trials and what they are asking of us and what they rob us of in the larger scheme of things. And it's that they are robbing us of our individual humanity, because when trouble strikes and the government comes knocking on our door, we cease being individual people and we immediately begin to see ourselves as a people. And I think the thing that is so hard about a case like this is that I truly don't know whether or not the government needed to bring this case. I don't know. I've been like, you stand outside that courthouse often enough and you hear these bloggers and TikTokers and live streamers, and the shit just gets in your head. But what I do know is that it is really important that we're talking about, like, do we separate the artist from the art? That's not, I hate that question. It's dumb. But for Black people, I think a corresponding question is, do we separate the individual, the person, from the people? And if we can do that, then we, I think, can treat someone like Sean Combs like the human man he is, who made mistakes. Like, what do we owe this man as an individual human being? And the place that I get off is using our history and our peoplehood to paper over his humanity and all its flaws. It isn't so much that I don't want Sean Combs in my life. I think that what I'm tired of is being put through this. And am I mad at him? Or, you know, am I mad at the government for putting him through this? I don't know, because what this looks like, on the other hand, is two women who say something terrible happened to them and nobody really listens. And that doesn't feel good either. So, I think that's where my bus stops. I think that's where my bus stops and I get off.
Yeah, no, you really helped to illuminate some of the things I've been thinking about.
Thank you for helping me through this conversation, or like just thinking through these feelings. I appreciate that. You can host this show anytime you want.
I don't think I want to do that, but thanks, Wesley.